And call the meeting to order. Stand for the flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Todd, you want to do roll call again? Here.
Councilperson Klur.
Here.
Councilperson Redmond.
Here.
Councilperson Stackfleth.
Here.
Councilperson Stearns.
Here.
Okay, folks, we've got a couple of interesting special presentations. We're going to start with Robert Kendrick. You're up first, and would you be so kind as just kind of introduce yourself, or what the category I think you're going to be talking to us about is?
Sure.
Robert has been up here. He has a number of facilities in different locations doing, prefabricated. You'll do a better job on the terminology. Building supplies and or building materials. So where you build, say, a wall with a window in it, and all those pieces, deliver it to a site, and then put up a building. And he's been looking at the landing for a potential development site that may or may not include some workforce housing. Does that do you justice?
That's close to it. Anyhow, I was here, I think probably how many years, many years ago. We were invited up to talk about the mill site for developing some homes. And I think Mr. Stearns was here at the time. It was 15 years ago, Councilman?
I think it was 2006, 2007 time.
Something like that. And we had looked at the land, and I was working on a development in Ashland. And they invited us down and to look at the site, and at that time it wasn't prepared for any kind of development at all. And about, I don't know how many months ago, I received a call from Tim. He said he saw my project. I'm working back up in Ashland, and he said he had been looking for me. And that the mill site was kind of coming alive. And I got together with Todd, Tim, and another council person and the planning department. And we were talking about, although I'm primarily a residential developer, primarily high density apartments specifically, I do a whole lot of other stuff. And I sent you just a little short shot of the variety of things I do, from commercial buildings, office buildings, but specifically a lot of residential. And when I got together with Todd, I was talking about how we've been working on the idea of meeting the housing demand through factory-built housing. And I introduced Tim to a cohort, Alex Neck, that has pack wall systems up in Medford. And what he'll do is build the walls, stack them. Let's say there's a 400, 300 unit project down in the Bay Area or up in Seattle or something. He can build the building in this factory wall by wall, just stacked on a truck, shipped up, and they can put that building up with very few people in a matter of days. So I've got a 230 unit project. You'll see that's called Grand Terrace 2 that I'm doing in Ashland, and we're planning on doing that the same way. So there's like 10 building sites there, and we'll be able to be environmentally clean on that by bringing each building in and stacking it up within 5 days. So when you look at the carbon footprint of factory built housing off-site compared to on-site development. On-site development in the construction industry contributes 29% of the carbon in the atmosphere. So when we're doing factory housing, we're talking about fewer people on the site, fewer waste, less traffic. The whole thing just settles down. More work, less time, more savings in the cost of construction. Comes out to about 29% savings in construction costs, about 50% in time. So that was one of the first things we talked about. And what I had talked with Todd and the planning department would like to take a parcel out there and put a line in to where we could expand it into not only just the wall systems, but eventually finished units that we can just truck and ship around. Right now, my interest is in the entire site. When I met a third time with planning and went over exactly what all was being planned in there, it was pretty much emphasized that workforce housing was kind of like the key word that everyone was looking for. And, you know, that's what I'm all about, is workforce housing. And what we were proposing is to take the site, develop a site the way the city would like to see it. And one of them would be factory housing on a small portion, and then move into workforce housing of any type of composition in a high density form or in smaller footprints, being smaller homes that would be price pointed at the wages and income levels of the community. There were other items that were required in the development. Of course, this would be a collaborative system where whatever you want, we would try to see how we could fit it together. We could take, you know, if there's an interest here, we could be satisfied with one particular site on there where we could build out our factory, but we thought it would be much more complementary and even easier for us if we had control to plan the entire thing. With our backgrounds and what we can do, I think we're confident enough, and I feel very confident that I can do it. And that's basically what we're here for. We don't have a proposal. We don't have anything drawn up. We're just really kind of introducing ourselves and telling you about what I've done and what we can do, and see what the city thinks. The key thing I know is employment too. So that was, we're not just supplying houses, but supplying employment. So we're looking at the factory housing component of bringing more jobs. So we'd like to do jobs and housing, and we'd like to meet, you know, the requirements in the medium income areas of the city. It's pretty simple. But I know it's a big, you know, it's a big piece of land. I know it's been sitting around out there for a long time. And if we can contribute anything to it, we'd be interested in it. So if there's any questions.
I bet you there are.
Oh, I'm sure. That's why I said it.
Well, thanks for coming down. So just to clarify, I get what you're saying, and you're talking about the west side of Mount Shasta Boulevard, right? The larger property. Okay.
Right.
So the factory would be built first, and it would actually lead to making the homes that people live in that are working in the factory, right?
We don't know which would be first, but
Okay.
we do know it's time. So whatever the time element is, I think we would probably meet what that market is. But I think our first thing is to start planning the factory.
Okay.
And then at the same time, if there is like the room and the requirements and the needs for the workforce housing, we can move into that direction. That's why I was asking like for the parcel, the larger parcel.
Right.
That has some control over what we're doing and have something to do while we're doing what
Okay,
we
so,
wanted to do in the first place.
so further clarification. So the factory wouldn't just go towards building housing for the workers. It would be something that would be producing product to be shipped.
That's the ideal part of the site, is the train line, because we'd be looking at some spurs in there.
Right.
Some of the other things, we've been looking around the town, there's lumber mills, some of the requirements on this type of housing needs staging area to store lumber. We're looking at interacting or bringing other players into the system, lumber, builders, the whole thing. So and the answer to that question, the train is really key because the markets that are served right now are all north and south. It's the port up north and the port down in Long Beach and everything here in between, and San Francisco.
Well, I guess the next question would be, and everyone's probably thinking this, how many people would you expect to be employed when it peaks out?
Just like in a phase one would be one line where one line would start off with 14 to 25 employees, which would expand from there perhaps up to 50 to 70.
Councilmember Stackfleth stole my questions, but I'm really excited for the next steps for this. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you.
Bob, back in the 2006, 2007 ancient history period, you and Madeline Hill had talked about or expressed interest in the east side of the Roseburg property, what we call the landing now.
Yeah.
For mixed residential, commercial. I think you had talked about possibility of having some commercial on the first floor and residential on the second floor, and having a local coffee shop and perhaps a supermarket on a...
Well, that's kind of the reason I was looking at the whole site, because it's not like we would be the ones that would be building it out, but we know how to get the contacts and generate the people that would come in and fulfill those type of developments. I'm not a supermarket builder. I'm not a supermarket man. I'm not a coffee shop guy. But, as a developer, I know how to generate the spin. I know how to generate and talk to people and get things done on the site. So that's why I was asking. It's not like I want the land. It's a collaborative thing where I think I can generate the activity to bring those type of components in. So it's not what I want, it's what you want, and I want to see if I can find them. Some of the really important things that I'm interested in, again, is the factory housing and affordable and workforce housing. So those are like my three things. Mm-hmm. I've done everything else. I've showed you some blueprints of things that I've been involved in, what I can do. So I know how to cost them. I know who, you may want a lot of commercial, but maybe you can't get commercial because the revenue's not there, the rent's not there, the cost to pay that stuff, and those are the things that I can help you with. We all want, we want things, there's some things we can't get. I'd like to get the important things, and I think those are jobs and housing that people can afford. And I think from there, we can get the rest.
On the west side, used to have what's the name of that? The track that would come into a factory or a mill. But I think that was taken out. The plans were the possibility of someone putting in a track, a side track or whatever that's called.
Well, there is a track runs right alongside of it.
Spur, thank you.
Right, Todd? I mean, I think we're looking at some land up in another parcel up in Jackson County, Oregon. And the railroad companies are excited about running tracks or running the spurs off. It is fee income to them. So, you've got it right in your backyard. And, that's what's kind of our interest there because it serves a really good purpose. It's, the environment, fuel, and another form of shipping. So.
Sounds positive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Robert.
Okay.
I appreciate you.
Do you need us here? Do you want us here for anything else?
Well, this isn't the time for a lot of those conversations, and they're going to involve that man over there.
Okay.
But there's there's certainly a great possibility here. Thank you for starting the dialogue.
Thank you. It's nice to be out in the public again.
Yeah, it is. It is indeed. Where's Dennis? Dennis? Oh, he's hiding back there.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and kind of give you an update on where we're at the with the expansion of the library. Last time we met, we decided that we weren't going to be able to go down and get more funds, so we were going to have to build within our own means that we had. Fortunately, those means had increased dramatically over the COVID period. And so I thought I might just go back and start where we were at. In 2017, in the spring, we'd worked all winter and on developing a plan for the expansion of the library with volunteer labor, and we'd come up with a approximately 4,000-foot expansion of the library, and we gave those plans to the city, and really all they needed at that point was the engineering to be done on it. The city decided to take a different tact, and they came up with plans that and hired Mount Shasta Engineering to do the plans for the library, and they came up with their own set of plans. And a week or so before our last LTAC meeting, 4 of us went over and reviewed those plans. It was the first time we'd really seen them in extension, in the full. And those people were 2 of them are here, Evelyn Callis and Cheryl Bauer, who are the secretary and the president of the Friends, but have been involved forever because they were the 2 ladies who essentially ran the library from 2010, when the county said we don't want anything to do with this anymore, through 2016. And just kind of a side note there, you can save a lot of money if you use volunteers as your administrators, but it's hard to find any as competent as these 2 were. The other person that attended that besides myself was Courtney, our present ED since 2016. And as we looked at the plans, there's a number of major problems with the plans. The architecture was not really compatible with the existing structure. It was built in such a way, or designed in such a way, that it was going to be very expensive to build. And it was way too large. It was well over 6,000 square feet. The price that they came up with, and this was in 2019, and so we know the prices are not going to be the same now, was $3.25 million to build just the extension. And also the other phases of the building project would be remodeling the existing structure after we get the extension built. And but what we're kind of aimed at right now is how do we get that new building up and build it within our means. So we decided, after consulting with Teresa and everything, that there wasn't much we could do with the existing plan, the 6,300 square foot. We start modifying it, it's not going to work. So we're essentially back to where we were in the spring of 2017, which isn't a particularly bad place in the sense, because we have a plan, and we can probably modify that fairly easily to meet whatever we deem are the requirements at this time. But we have a couple of major questions that we had coming into this that we don't know. We've seen a huge increase in our income from the sales tax income of the city, which allows us to think now that we can go ahead and service a loan. And also we've seen a huge increase in our reserves, basically because the library hasn't been open, except maybe on the curbside for about a year and a half, and we will be opening up full bore, it seems, on July 1st of this year. And there also are some questions that the people in the know had, that Courtney and others have, is the use going to be the same when we come back? And it probably isn't, and that's obviously plays a key part in the design or the redesign of the library. It was one of the factors that we considered why we decided to design the addition the same way that the existing library is designed, which is essentially a post and beam structure with all inside walls are not bearing, so they can be moved, taken out, and as the use changes, you can change your spaces to accommodate that without tearing the whole building down and so on. And also, it's probably one of the least expensive construction means too. So, but the biggest concern that we had, and I think it's probably your concern too, and the city's concern, is that we don't get into the same kind of pickle we got in before, where we're not working together. All aspects are working together. The city council, city government, and LTAC are all working together to get this project complete, because the bottom line is it's not going to happen unless that happens. It just isn't going to happen. So I've got a few suggestions about how we might go about that. I don't think just agreeing that that's what we need to do is enough. We need to set up some sort of a structure that allows communication between all factions and allows for us to do move forward with this project on a consensus basis. Everybody agrees that this is what we need to do. And as you well know, there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of problems and decisions that need to be made as we move forward. And so my suggestion is that what we need to do to move forward is to appoint you can call it a scoping committee, an executive committee, to oversee the whole project from now until it's actually the building's up and running. And I think that committee needs to include a member of the city council, representatives from the city, and representatives from LTAC, and that we need to meet together, hash out what the problems are to be, what the solutions are, who's going to work on what aspects of the project, and keep those lines of communication open through the whole project so that everybody's vested in making this happen. If we can do that, I think we can come up with a new plan. And there's a lot of big things that we've got to decide that we can't, building costs are obviously one huge one. That income, which I was glad to hear Jeffrey told me that the income is still going up, which is good, because I didn't know whether this was a one-time blip, during the heart of COVID, because everybody was buying online. But it appears it's not. It appears that this is, so that gives us some comfort that we actually can make a decent estimate. Because our worst nightmare, when we were doing the planning phase, we went up and we visited the libraries in both Shasta County, but we went up and visited the libraries up in Jackson County. And the dilemma that they were in was one we wanted to avoid at all costs. They had limited income. They'd managed to get money to build these really, really nice libraries in various communities, including Medford, but they'd run out of money to run the libraries. And we want to make sure that and so they were going to have to go back to the taxpayers and say, we need more money. And, you know, that wasn't a good situation. So as we're expanding the library, probably doubling the space in the library, we want to make darn sure that we still have enough money in the fund to use that extra space, to whatever increased staffing we may need, whatever obviously increased costs of running an 8,000 to 9,000 foot structure as opposed to a 4,500 foot structure. So that's our major concern there. But I think we can move ahead. But, you know, everybody at LTAC at our last meeting, the bottom line is we need to make sure we have some sort of a structure that allows us to have confidence that we can move ahead together. We essentially got burned last time, and it cost us $250,000 of our money, although I imagine that a large parts of that, except for the building itself, are probably salvageable and transferable over to a new structure. So the redoing of the structure will not be, hopefully not that much, but we'll have to see. But so I'd appreciate any comments that you might have on this plan to move forward, whether you think it's the right one or whether you've got some other ideas about how we might do this. But I think the key element in here is we got to set up some sort of structure that allows us to move together, to move forward together and supporting each one, and everybody knows what's going on, you know, in all aspects of it. We have, to use an overused word, transparency, and hopefully we can get the community back excited about this project again, because ultimately they're going to have to be the ones that come up with quite a bit of funds, I think, to kind of finish everything off. You know, we can build the building and put it all together, but the actual putting things in the building and organizing is probably going to be left up to the community to do that, to come up with the funds to do that. And we need their enthusiasm to do that. So
Thank you, Dennis.
sure.
Councilors, any questions for Dennis?
So when would you like to get started with this committee, this joint committee?
I think we could start it, you know, as soon as we can. You know, we can try to put it together, and because we got, you know, and I was thinking originally that we might have to wait until the fall to actually put together the new building when we had a couple of these issues set up, but with the good news that Jeffrey gave me, it seems to me like one of my big concerns was that we weren't going to have this, that this was a one-time blip, and obviously that's going to have huge effects on what we can build. But it sounds to me like we can be somewhat confident that this blip is going to be permanent, and therefore it gives us a lot more, I guess, confidence that if we do decide to do $1 million loan, that we can actually, you know, actually pay for it and so on. But so I would think that we should start this, you know, get this committee together as soon as we can, and then have our first meeting and go over what everybody's issues are and start moving forward. I mean, it's been 5 years, so I just assume it wasn't another 5. You know?
Okay.
Dennis, I agree that communication and wide involvement is important to make it successful. And you threw out a possible composition. I imagine that that's just for discussion purposes, and there can be further discussion with city staff and council, or perhaps community.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
And we can also change that structure as we go along. If we find it's not adequate, we can add people. And that executive committee, though, is certainly going to have to form other committees to go about, like fundraising when we get really into it, or the actual building committee that's going to take the plans. I would think we take the plan that we gave you in 2017, we make some adjustments to that, and then that's where we can start with at least, and then start answering some of the questions we have, costs, income, and so on.
I have a lot of interest in this project, so I can volunteer to be the city liaison. If no one else is chomping at the bit, I'd be happy to.
At this point, it's not an action item, it's just a presentation, but I would imagine that we're going to put this on a future agenda, near term.
Yeah, because there's likely several folks who are interested.
Okay, so through the chair, I'm glad you want to volunteer for this because it can get controversial, and here's the controversial point. I was involved with LTAC. I was the council liaison to LTAC back in 2017, and you didn't really broach the subject, but the big controversial point prior to it being, the plan being sent to Mount Shasta Engineering was the amount of square footage that was going to be used for city government purposes. So I'm asking you, how do you feel about that now? Because the money's raised through that tax are for library purposes, and just have a feeling some people on this panel have mixed feelings about that.
This is the kind of question, though, that LTAC shouldn't be deciding, and this is the exact kind of questions that we need to put before this committee. And they're the ones that need to, all users and so on. And what you're talking about is the meeting room that we put into the library.
I think there were ambitions to do a lot more than that at the time. Yeah, offices, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but those are the kind of decisions that can't be made.
Actually, I disagree with you on that. The money is for library purposes only.
That's correct.
And I don't think it should be open for discussion to transfer any city hall functions to the library.
Right.
Okay, so I'm warned against that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. But at the same time, wait a few minutes here. At the same time, the library is and this is one of the things that we need to discuss, is how is the usage of the library going to change? And one of the things that I see is perhaps this can become more of a meeting place, because essentially people bring their own library to the library nowadays. Those things sitting in front of you. And we provide, I think one of our greatest services is we provide Chromebooks to those people that don't have access to the internet, so they come in. But, so stacks of books are still an important part of it, but places to sit and work on your Chromebook, places or your own iPad, meetings, for people to come together, I think could become an important function of the library. I don't know. I'm just throwing these ideas out. And these are the kind of questions that we need to kind of come to grips with before we redesign the library, because it's obviously going to make a difference on how you put your spaces in. One of the great examples in the plan that was raised great concerns by the four of us, especially the three people, Courtney and Cheryl and Evelyn, who had actually run the library for a period of time, was the fact that they designed the children's area and the teen area in such a way that it was going to be very difficult to monitor, which is a no-go. I mean, the liability on that situation is just, and that was one of our major concerns. And so we've got a lot of issues like that. And as we go over that plan again, we can we can hopefully work those out together. That's the key, you know. And I agree with John that basically the funds are legally restricted to use on the library. And so, and they can't be used in any other way. But what the library is going to look like, well, I don't think we know totally yet, but that's one of the things we need to spend the next few months getting an idea and putting together so that we can put together an expansion plan that actually meets the needs, the present needs and the future needs of this community. So.
Thank you, Dennis.
So what we might, if that's the case, maybe we want to put this on the agenda for the next meeting.
We'll do that.
And we can appoint that committee and then we can get going. It's exciting. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Let's open up public comment. You see, is there anybody in the audience who wants to come up and speak this evening? And Todd, I don't know if you can see on the screen over there if there are is anybody online? No hands up. Then we'll move on to council and staff comments. Todd, you want to introduce this?
Sure. You know, I don't have a lot to add this time other than you may recall that we approved a Green Waste Day. And, you know, there's been a lot of moving parts to pull together on this. And so I've got a flyer put together, all the logistics. It'll be done at the Roseburg site. It will be on Friday, June 3rd and on Saturday, June 4th. And we'll be able to lock the gates up at night so we're not getting everybody's refuse from everywhere around the county. And flyers will be going out this week. So. Flyers will be saying what? About what kind of materials you can bring on those 2 days. And it is garden waste. And we'll have somebody from Public Works directing people with garden waste one way, and people with woody material in another, all kinds of, you know, you can bring this, you can't, you know, you can't bring stumps, you can't bring painted wood, but you can bring logs up to 4 feet long, and, you know, it'll explain this very, very clearly.
Muriel, anything from you, counselors? Please.
I just wanted to thank the Grindero event for putting on an excellent event this weekend, and I'm not just saying that because I benefited as a business from it, but I am saying that as well. So, but I can't wait for the next 2 years of Grindero, that's for sure.
You weren't the only business that benefited on it.
It was helpful to be on
It
the
was an
itinerary
amazing
as a
event.
night spot, I'm not gonna lie.
Chief?
Just wanted to, you guys probably got it in your packet. You saw the Zone Haven is specific to Mount Shasta. Those are going out in the mailers this week, I've been told. So every residence and business in the city will be getting the same thing you have, which will have the option to get you to Zone Haven. And for those that still haven't signed up for Code Red, to sign up. It's going to make everything automatic, very fast and efficient. So
Great.
that's going out this week.
Thanks so much. Yes, sir?
So this would be kind of directed to city manager. So the Planning Commission has a number of items that it's working on, one of which would be the short-term rental ordinance. Another one would be the development of the 2045 general plan. Might be some other things of very significant import that come out of, say, the Alta consulting project. From a continuity standpoint, is there any update on without getting into the other issue, but is there going to be a problem with continuities and a slowdown in getting things done?
So I anticipate that we'll be slow until we ramp up. We have a consulting planning company on board. We had a person from that company partially run the last planning commission meeting, and the results were less than spectacular. So I'm working out some issues with the company and making sure that we have somebody that comes that's prepared. One of the things that I'll have to be bringing back is a budget adjustment at the next council meeting. Apparently, this firm, when the agreement was signed, could spend up to $20,000, and apparently there was some work that was done previously along with the work to prep this last planning commission meeting. So we're going to need to ask for a budget adjustment. I just need to figure out what that number is. So when we resolve our closed session item in about a week, hopefully we can get up to speed with the consultant planner and then go out and seek somebody qualified for the position.
Thank you.
Todd, I noticed in the notes of the Planning Commission meeting that they had requested some, for the short-term rentals, they had requested city council input. I didn't understand what format that was or the manner in which they wanted input before they brought something to us. They kind of, I think I was reading between the lines, but it's basically saying, hey, we'd kind of like to know how you want to see this and kind of work together. Did you get that sense?
Well, I need to confirm this. My understanding is the Planning Commission approved the short-term rental ordinance in terms of, gave it their blessing, but I may not have that right. What I need to do is get through anything that was left behind and find out where this is, because my understanding is the next step is to bring it to council for approval.
Okay.
So, Mayor, so my impression, Mr. Mayor, is that there was they were not sure about whether to go with a percentage on a cap. Right? And they weren't sure to go with a hard cap, just a number, or a percentage of units available type of arrangement. So that's where I think they wanted some feedback. That's how I read it too.
And also the grandfathering aspect, or how do we meet those caps relative to where we are now, is up by zones, and there seemed like they're, anyway, okay.
Before we move on, Mayor? Mayor?
Yes.
I have a question for the city manager. I notice we've had some substantial checks issued related to wastewater treatment plant. I was hoping that you could give us a indication of progress and current status.
I actually do not know what the larger checks are for. I know that we have had a spike in ammonia that we're trying to, or that has been resolved. And we have put forward the plan to the powers that be, and it has been accepted. But in terms of the wastewater treatment plant and where it is in development, I just haven't talked to Brooke lately.
If you could share that with us in the near future.
Yep.
City Manager, you've already covered all the committee updates, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add?
So I don't have any committee updates this time. We have DEAC scheduled for this Wednesday, and I'll be bringing some updates back from that.
We're going to move on to the consent agenda. First of all, councilors, is there anything that you'd like to consider separately on the agenda?
I have a couple of questions. I think directed to the Finance Director on the CDBG resolution, page 44, section 2, says not to exceed $0. Section 1 talked about 500,000, I think it was, so I'm thinking that may...
Is in regard to program income. We're not using any program income
I see,
in
okay.
that. So what we're doing is we're just, it's for senior snow removal, so it's a public services type application is what we're trying to do. So we're not using any program income in that, which is why that part says 0.
I looked at that and thought maybe it was just a placeholder, not...
No,
okay.
they give you a template that you have to use for this exactly by word, or they may reject it. So we do it exactly like they want it, even though the information that we're providing may have a 0.
Okay, and then on section 4, it talked about finance director or designee with an asterisk. Usually when I see an asterisk, I think of a placeholder for where a name is supposed to go in there.
Well, the asterisk would be city manager. So it's generally city manager or finance director for CDBG. And if you don't do it exactly, they will reject the application.
So would you be agreeable to our substituting city manager for the asterisk in section 4?
Absolutely.
I've changed my name to that glyph. I've changed my name to that glyph, the asterisk. No, never mind.
Actually, Brandy from Great Northern Services is here and can speak to this, which is why she is here.
Thank you. So this is also a public meeting. We had noticed this as a public meeting as part of the CDBG process for the NOFA. We have to hold a public meeting, and we no longer have to do a public hearing, so you don't have to open and close the public hearing. So this needs to be in the record because it needs to go in part of the application for the senior snow removal. So I'm just going to go through the blurb really fast just so it's on record. The community development and economic development allocations of the state CDBG program was published in a combined notice of funding availability this year. It was published on April 19th. Eligible cities and counties may submit community development and housing applications for the CDBG funds under the 2022 NOFA, so that's what we're learning now, for a maximum per application of $1.5 million, and that's per the type of application, so what we're doing that's not available for that. It is estimated that the funding for the state for this program year is $30 million. Eligible activities under this allocation are for home ownership assistance, housing rehabilitation programs, public service programs, planning studies, economic development, business assistance, and microenterprise. What's not available for funding this year are public facilities and public improvement. It must benefit low to moderate income households or persons, and that's generally what California focuses on. They don't usually focus on slums and blight or meeting urgent community development needs. As Muriel stated, there's no program income this year. And so what we are looking for is community input. So if there's anybody online who has community input, or if you have a community input for this, but what we're planning on going out for this NOFA, for the application, is for senior snow removal to continue this program. It's been widely popular with the senior citizens of Mount Shasta in the past, and so that's what we're looking for to apply for now. If you have any other suggestions, I fully take those on and we'll consider those. The application is due on June 21st right now, so keep that in mind. But that's what the resolution speaks to. And as Mariel said, if it is not exact word for word for this, they will reject the whole entire application. So I would suggest not changing designee, because that would be who Mariel would designate in the absence, so she can designate anybody, but we cannot change the wording on this at all. And it's per state. This is the state attorneys who handed this down from on high. So I don't want to change any wording to jeopardize the application on this.
I would agree with that, except that we had done that before, and I happened to be the designee, and we were rejected because my name wasn't actually in there correctly for some reason. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, they change the rules all the time.
Yeah, and so the latest is you will use this resolution. You will not change a word in it.
Correct.
So, and the designee, I can ask about the designee if you would like to have
let's
the
do
city
that.
manager as the
Let's make absolutely
or
sure.
you know if you would like to say the city manager as designee. So,
Yeah.
I will ask that.
I think a thing to be noted here, the snow removal program has been funded through program income in the past. The program income is now waning. In other words, we're not receiving more than that $35,000 to keep it as a federal funding source for snow removal. So unless we do this application in the notice of funding availability, we will not have senior snow removal next year because we do not have the funding for it. There's no more program income left. So that's why doing this application for this public service is something that I believe is very important for the seniors of Mount Shasta.
And just to piggyback on that, there's ranking. So we're going to be going, of course, against every other jurisdiction who applies for public services. So for Mount Shasta, with some of the other categories that we can apply for, so say for housing rehabilitation or economic development, which we currently have funding for. So we wouldn't go out for request more funding for that. This would be ranked the highest. The highest ranking on this category is 100, and Mount Shasta has a 90, and that's pretty high for Mount Shasta because it's usually in the lower tiers because of the income of the population of the city.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Don't go away. Any questions?
Yes, thank you. So if I understand correctly, we can likely insert where the asterisk is designee and put in the city manager of Mount Shasta without naming the city manager.
Yes, we should never put a name in there. It would be the title.
Okay, that's my question number one. Question number two is, just to make you aware, City of Mount Shasta has had difficulty attracting police officers, for example, and one reason is the cost of housing in Mount Shasta. So I would think an alternative that you mentioned was to for down payment assistance, whether it's for police officers or perhaps also teachers or people at the hospital. Are those persons basically, do those people basically make too much money to qualify for CDBG funds of this type?
Yeah, so currently, for the income limits, for say a household of, and it has to be 80% of the area median income, and for a 3-person household, that is $50,200. For a 4-person household, that's $55,750. So generally, I'm assuming, unless the, police officer has a very large family, hopefully that income, or if there's a dual income if it's a dual income family, they'll probably be making more than that, so they wouldn't qualify for that. So it's really geared towards low to moderate income households that would be assisting. And right now, the scoring on that would be really low. We would have to make a very good persuasive argument on how to implement that program.
All right, and considering that the deadline is next month in 4 weeks,
Yeah, I mean, if we did want to do something like that, it would be something to put into consideration for the next funding cycle in 2023. And if that doesn't, so a lot of times what will happen, as we know with grants, you will submit it one time, you may not get that grant, and then you submit it on the next round, and because they will come back and tell you, yeah, you scored, this is what you scored, this is how you can improve your score, and therefore if you submit it on the next round, you may be able to get the funding for it.
all right, thank you.
John? Thank you very much. So we will move ahead with the consent agenda, where the city manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes, May 9th, 2022, regular city council meeting. B, approval of disbursements, accounts payable April 21st, May 4th, and May 10th, 2022. Total gross payroll and taxes for the period ending April 17th and May 1st, 2022. C, committee minutes, Planning Commission, April 19th, 2022, regular meeting. D, the monthly investment report on April 2022. E, the Police Department monthly report, also in April 2022. F, approve the winning bid from High Mountain Excavation for the mastication and removal of fuels on 10 acres of city-owned property. And finally, G, approval of a resolution approving an application for funding and the execution of a grant agreement and any amendments hereto from the 2021-2022 funding year of the State Community Development Block Grant Program.
Mr. Mayor, through the chair, I would move to approve items A through G with the resolution 22- next in order, with the amendment of that resolution to insert the city manager of the city of Mount Shasta, where in place of the asterisk on section 4.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Agenda item 8, we're going to have a presentation, no we're not, from Johnson Controls. We are. Oh, there you are, hiding behind the television screen. City manager, want to introduce this for us, please?
Sure. Brian LeBrie is here from Johnson Controls. Apparently, before my time, there was solar put on the wastewater treatment plant and on the public works yard, and there has been some concerns over the performance of the solar installation, and we are here to get an update on the actual performance in comparison to what we've been presented up to date.
Are you set up? Yeah. Sure, we'll hang on.
No kidding. Oh, gosh. Cluster. Without Kathy. Oh, gosh. High stress?
I'm actually pretty good at it. It is projecting on the backside of this. It's just a mess.
Oh, my gosh.
They're working on getting it up. My apologies, I didn't send the presentation to the right people, so they weren't able to have it right away. So we're getting it pulled up right now. Thank you, members of council. Really happy to be able to present an update on the solar project. It's been a couple of years since we started construction. It's been some time since we completed construction, so we wanted to be able to come back and give you an update of where we're at today. Just as a recap, I know most of you have already heard this before, but we've got the solar arrays at the City Hall and Police Station. Those are combined into one array. We've got the corporation yard and the wastewater treatment plant. In addition to those 3 arrays, there was also the undergrounding of electric utilities at the corporate yard and the new garage that was built to mount the panels on top of, as well as to store the heavy machinery. Just as a general update on the structure of the process, the project was to be financed over 25 years and to have the debt service paid for by the energy savings that the project generates.
Construction update slide.
Yeah, the construction update slide. 3. There you go. Oh, there you go. So the last time that we had a conversation, the wastewater treatment plant was not fully completed. Well, it was completed, but it was not fully interconnected. So now all 3 arrays are completed. They are interconnected. They are generating. The corporate yard garage is complete, as well as the undergrounding. And the wastewater treatment plant array is interconnected, but it's interconnected at a reduced load for the next couple of years until the new wastewater treatment plant is completed, and then the rest of the array will be interconnected to the new switchgear that will be part of the construction for the new treatment plant. Giving some background into why that happened, some of the challenges were the changes of tariff, which we got around. We were able to get the city grandfathered into the change tariff, but the challenge was at the wastewater treatment plant, where we had sized the plant for 814,000 kilowatt hours. The plant actually used 592,000 kilowatt hours. So that caused a lot of energy. Basically, when we went to interconnect, the utility said that's going to be generating too much energy. There's going to be too much export. So there was going to be a bunch of costs for electric improvements for safety purposes for the grid as per Pacific Power. So we worked around that to reduce the size of that plant, of that array at the wastewater treatment plant, as to not trigger those safety upgrades, because the new wastewater treatment plant that's going to be constructed in a couple of years is going to be using exponentially more power, so that shouldn't be an issue.
Brian, you're going to want to stand a hair closer to that mic in about 10 seconds.
All right. So I mentioned the grandfathering into the net metering tariff, as well as the reduced capacity. And the other solution that we identified was to adjust the measurement and verification term, and that's where the project guarantee comes in. So the measurement and verification term actually starts in year 4, which will be right after that wastewater treatment plant is built and the full size of the wastewater treatment plant array is put online. But we adjusted the scope of work for that, so that way the city still has a a two-year service agreement for us to go through, monitor the progress, make sure that everything is operating the way it's supposed to be. So that way, in that year 4, we'll have already been very involved throughout that process, so that the transition to the performance period for the project guarantee is seamless. Just to review the financial implications of reducing the size of that array, because we had to reduce the size of the wastewater treatment plant array to 30% of its overall capacity, there was about a $38,000 shortfall, so to speak, a reduced revenue at that wastewater treatment plant after you account for the adjusted savings that's generated from the reduced size array, your savings from your utility bills by not having to use as much energy. And so that was $38,000 a year for what was planned to be 3 years. So even though that was not Johnson Controls' responsibility, a lot of that fell on that treatment plant not using as much energy, we decided to write the city a check so that way we could ensure that you were making your debt service payments for that $38,000 a year for 3 years. First check was written in 2021. This second check is going to be coming out any day now and should be delivered by June 10th. And then the third check will be written next year in 2020. Third and final check will be written in 2023. So that totals that lost revenue at that wastewater treatment plant. So that way we could ensure that you were whole for that debt service. To go over the maintenance plan, an annual maintenance agreement was executed with Whipple Electric. They're the local installer that we utilized for project construction. They're based out of Etna, so that way we can ensure that long-term the array is going to be operating optimally, and you're going to make sure that all the nuts and bolts are accounted for to ensure that the plant is the arrays aren't going to be lacking the essential long-term maintenance. Then to go over the performance, where the project's at to date. This is a little bit of an eye chart, but I'll summarize it. The arrays are, they're actually doing better than we had originally designed, 4% better across the board. The way that you can get the summary is if you look at the bottom, right below the months, if you look the last row of numbers, that's a total, that's a summary total for the different sites. So you can see the City Hall is about, it's just under the estimated, the as-built kilowatt hour sizing. The corporate yard is about 5,000 kilowatt hours over, and the wastewater treatment plant array is about 10,000 kilowatt hours over. There is a little bit of a, the data calculation is a little bit wonky because the reporting software was down for a period of time throughout those years, throughout the last 10 months. So this is 10 months of data that we have from the 3 arrays operating at the same time. What happened was the reporting software would go down. You wouldn't have data for that period of time, and then it would come back up, and then you would see a big spike because it's kind of like a water meter that you're reporting the communication software goes down, but the water meter still calculates, and then when it comes back online, it sends all the data out. So you can see in July of 2021, there's a 16,000 kilowatt hour total on the corporate yard when it was sized for 9,000, so that's a lot more. That's because we don't have June up on that screen, but if you looked at June was way less. June was nearly zero, so a lot of the usage that was the generation from June actually caught back up and showed in July. So you can see there's a few months throughout that period of time that, just in, what is that, October at the corporate yard, it shows 0. But then the next month, there's 7,000. So it was a little finicky, but you can see the 10-month totals You're still, right now, 4% over, which is a good thing. We're very happy that the system is performing a little bit better than designed. So overall review of next steps, the second annual check for the $38,000 will be expected in the next few weeks. Then the third and final check to be issued in 2023. The city to interconnect the full wastewater treatment system once the new wastewater treatment plant is constructed. That's all planned out with Pace Engineering as a part of the wastewater treatment plant construction. And then the measurement and verification performance period to commence after the construction of the wastewater treatment plant is completed, as well as the interconnection of the full wastewater treatment solar array. That's all I got. Any questions?
Thank you, Brian. Councilors, questions? Tessa, you're good.
And Johnson Controls is covering the first 3 years of the shortage, the 38,000?
Yes.
Okay, and then the city will pick that up for the remaining 22.
Well, the goal is for there to not be a shortage after that, because the shortage was due to the fact that the wastewater treatment plant was using less energy, so we had to reduce the size of that array to meet the load, like to only equal the load of that treatment plant. And so at the time it was envisioned that the new plant was going to be online in 3 years. So the plan was going to be to interconnect the full array, which is what the entire debt service payment is based off of, once that new wastewater treatment plant is completed. So once the new treatment plant is finished, the full array gets turned online, and then we're already looking at projections right now, so if it continues to generate exactly like it is right now, there will be no shortfall moving forward.
Thank you.
That was the agreement between Johnson and the city, is that this would pay for itself.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm with you.
Okay. On a related matter, but not your presentation, we've talked in the past, and you've suggested in the past that we look into battery storage, and you had indicated that that there was still some grant funding, at least at that point in time, available that the city might be able to obtain for grant storage. What's the update on that?
I don't have an update as of right now, but I can go and continue. The grant that I was talking about is the Blue Sky grant, and the timeline for that is the end of summer is when they start opening applications. So what I can do is I can take that offline and talk with Todd and look into if there are opportunities for the city, what sites would be good opportunities, namely the wastewater treatment plant, but to be able to plan through identifying applicable sites and then figuring out how we can align with the timeline for the grants. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is the grants do not cover the entire cost of the project. They offset them, as well as then taking into account the other incentives that are available from the state. So there are some grants, there are rebates and incentives, but they still don't cover the entire cost of a battery project. So you would still need to, if a battery project is desired, to structure it in the same type of way that we structured this solar project, where you use the cost savings that are generated by a battery to pay the remaining amount that would need to be financed or with a cash project, and then reimburse yourself.
So a year or two ago, you seemed to think that was a good idea for the city to pursue because it would end up with a net savings to the city. Are you still of that mind at this point?
Yes. Yeah, we would need to do our due diligence, and we need to do some development into cost estimating and savings models. But I do believe that it is a project that can be substantially beneficial when it comes to cost savings long term, especially with your new wastewater treatment plant coming up. The biggest thing that we need to work through is it the right time to put a battery at the treatment plant, or do we wait and then get the the data from the new wastewater treatment plant's operation, because in order to size a battery, you use something called 15-minute interval data, which is exactly how much energy a facility is using at a 15-minute period throughout the day, and then you size the battery and basically model its charging and discharging off of that. And so knowing we could size it for the current system, but if it ends up not penciling out now off of the current plant, then it might be a situation where we would have to wait until the new plant is operational. But that's something that we can talk through. We can do our investigation and come back with an update later on after Todd and I run that to ground.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Okay, so to the battery, we wouldn't really want to bother with the battery if the water treatment plant's power usage exceeds what the array can generate, regardless of the 15-minute intervals, right? I mean,
the benefit of batteries is that you can offset your demand charges. So you have your normal energy charges that are just how much you use energy and then when you use it and how much it costs. But you get hit with pretty extensive demand charges based off of how much it's in addition to your base rate per kilowatt hour charge, and demand savings is what batteries can help offset. So even if you have a solar plant that is designed to offset like 95% of your plant's energy, you're still going to have demand charges, and that's what batteries can help you with.
Right, so help us with the demand charges. I see this at the ice skating rink with our chiller. It has something to do with the initial turn on of the energy needing device.
And that's specific to the ice rink, because what will happen there is they have large chillers, and so when you turn on those large chillers, there's a huge suck of energy from the grid at once. And if that happens at a time where there's a lot of other people using energy on the grid, then the utility will give you a large demand charge for that period of time.
Right, I see that all the time.
Same with the wastewater treatment plant. There's a lot of high energy using equipment, and if those operate at a time where energy is taxed on the grid, then you'll get hit with large charges.
So the battery might make sense, but that would require some analysis. Okay.
Yes.
So back to my original. So this project was a 2019 project that stretched into 2020. Pretty much it was finished in 2020. Were you here in 2019 when it started?
I was here in 2018 when we first started talking.
You were here for the whole time?
Yeah.
Okay. So John and Jeff were here when we were making these decisions, and pretty much everything we're discussing is clear to you, right? Okay. So my questions are, can you remember what the actual total cost of the project ended up being?
After the
garage and everything?
After the amendment, it was a little over $3 million. I think it was $3.1 million.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact number off
Does
the top
that
of my
sound
head. Yeah, there was, because the initial phase was, I think, the initial portion of the contract was 1.7, and then the second was 1.4.
Right.
That includes the additions to the
corporate yard, so that was the second part. Right. Okay, and so your model, and just to reconfirm, I believe it was a 23-year bond that we floated, and it actually was a consolidation bond with some old debt related to our sewer system, right? So it was over $4 million, I think, that were floated, and it ended up being 2.3, I think, percent interest. Or was it 1.3? I know it was low, but 2.3 rings a bell. Oh, really? It's a okay. So I don't really have time right now to calculate this, but your modeled savings is $96,000, right? $96,000 a year.
I think that was for the wastewater treatment specifically.
Okay. So what I'm getting at is the payment on I'm not prepared to say what the payment on $3.2 million is, 23 years. At 2.3% interest is, but think it's more than $96,000. So my worry is that we're negative on this, and I will keep doing my own investigation, but I'm a little skeptical.
Well, if I recall correctly, if I may, one of the things that we factored in was probable increase in utility rates over time. So the savings that you have put in here, is that based on a flat rate, or is that based upon a projected increasing rate?
Well, when I
Utility
was
rate.
reporting on the performance of the array, I was talking about straight kilowatt hours. So that's not even, there's a number off to the side where it talked about totals, but when I was talking about performance, that was straight kilowatt hour per kilowatt hour. When you look into the contract savings over time, it accounts for, I think it was an extremely modest 3%. I'd have to remember off the top of my, I'd have to go back into it, but I believe it was around 3% escalation, which most utilities are experiencing much more than 3%. But I can't, as Councilmember Stackfeld had mentioned about the structure of the bond, that was put together by Cam Weiss, the city's bond counsel, so I can't talk to all the specifics of the structuring of the financing, but we walked through all of the cost savings, all of the project performance that was modeled and guaranteed in the contract for the 25-year term. And then it was my understanding that he structured the debt service payments so that way you would end up using the savings for those debt service.
The bond guy did that, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we worked very closely with the city's bond counsel while he structured that financial model. And it was my understanding that he was using the energy savings as a benchmark to size the debt service payments moving forward. And we're 4% above our models for the project performance. So
Okay,
on our end, everything is.
So your model savings are about 100, yeah, you're right. So the $96,000 was for the waste treatment plant alone, and then you add in, it's about $113,000. So the question is the bond payment $113,000? Looks like it's higher. So could be a problem with the communication between the bond counsel and Johnson Controls, but further investigation is needed. But to sum up, I'm skeptical still, but you've made a good presentation.
Thank you. And I can run that to ground and see, we can have some follow-up discussions with Muriel and Todd.
Oh, just in case for the audience, this is related to the general goal. So the real goal of the solar array project is to lower our carbon footprint. Okay, that's the first goal. Second goal is to, after the initial payback of the construction, to have a lower power costs. And that would take 23 years, possibly 25. I kind of remember 23. The third thing in this arrangement was that it would be net zero cost to the city with respect to construction costs and the savings power-wise. I've been skeptical about this from the beginning, and I'm still skeptical. I apologize for that, but it's just my nature. Okay.
Brian, thank you.
You're welcome.
It was thorough. I'm clear. Anybody else? Well, there is, public comment. Anybody got their hands up? Nope, okay. Well, then we'll bring it back to council, and there is no decision here. We're just receiving the information, so thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Brian.
Agenda item number 9 is the discussion and possible action on the bonus structure for new police hires to attract qualified candidates. City Manager, would you introduce this, please?
Sure. So police and dispatchers, we've been having a hard time keeping folks, recruiting them. And so, like Wairika, we're proposing to put together a bonus structure of $5,000, where that would be split in 4 payments for police officers and for dispatchers. Once an applicant is hired, after 6 months, they'd receive 25% of that bonus. After a year, they'd receive another 25% of that bonus. After 2 years, they'd see 3/4 of that $5,000, and that was after 2 years. After 3 years, they would see the full $5,000. Now, there would be an additional $1,000 bonus for applicants for each year of experience they have bringing onto the job, up to a cap of $15,000. And the beauty of this is it fits right into our sweet spot of our second tranche of COVID funds that are coming into the city. And one of the things that they list in the guidelines is the ability to recruit and maintain public services, fire and police. So it would all be paid for through that. And I think the other thing to mention here is that there has been an ongoing dispute with county sheriff's office where I don't know all the specifics behind it, but they have now refused to pick up the cost of health care benefits for those officers, which is a cut of about 15% into their pay. And so we've seen some of the police officers that are very well trained from the county starting to leave, and if we put this bonus structure in place, we may be able to pick some of these folks up.
To the chair. The verbiage you said was to recruit or retain your police officers. Is the 1,000 per year bonus, can that be applied to our existing force?
Don't know.
That wasn't how we set it up, but I'd have to think about that. It could, I mean, I know the COVID funds can be used that way, but I'd have to think about when the use of those funds are appropriate and when they're not. But I could, we could, if a resolution was passed tonight, there could be an amended resolution to bring that piece back.
Yeah, I'd love to reward this, those that have stuck with us.
Stuck through,
yeah.
Right.
I think this is a good presentation. I think it's a good idea. I don't know how many positions we may be talking about, so perhaps staff can clarify.
Right now, we are fully staffed with police officers, but that's just a couple of backgrounds away from them being at Anderson PD, getting a year gone. Two of the part-time on-call positions are currently open with dispatch and have been open for quite a while. In fact, we've now in our second round of recruitment just to try to get an applicant to test long enough, because we're just not getting anybody to respond. So dispatchers are working an enormous amount of overtime. In fact, my overtime budget right now is double what we had planned for dispatch, just because we can't get anybody to come into dispatch right now. So this can draw some, I know people are leaving dispatch centers and they're struggling everywhere, but this could draw somebody so we can fill that position and not have to be paying overtime and get dispatch back where it needs to be.
So this proposal would be for police officers and or dispatchers?
Correct.
Correct. And just, I'm going to restate the obvious because, sometimes I space out. The idea that we're paying so much in overtime right now and that we can use COVID funds for recruitment and retention, if we get the people on board, we're saving a lot of money in overtime. So.
Any other questions? Anybody with their hands up out there in the audience?
I see none.
Okay. Let's bring it back to council then and just ask if there's any commentary before, or a motion.
I'll move forward with a motion to approve the proposed bonus structure for the hiring and retention of Mount Shasta police officers with possible amendment to maintain current officers
Police officers and dispatchers?
and dispatchers.
I'll second that.
By title only.
Correct.
Look, she's got me trained.
Yes.
Well, it's a motion, we don't actually have a title, so it's,
Right.
No,
Oh, right.
There's no resolution. That's right.
Just say it to be safe.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Kathy would be so proud. Agenda item 10 is discussion of possible action for a salary adjustment for the Public Works Director position. And again, City Manager, if you would introduce this to us.
So bear with me. This gets a little bit convoluted because the terms are very similar. You may have found that when you read the staff report, that it may be a little confusing to follow. You may recall that historically we've had a public works director that is somebody without a CE, a professional engineer stamp. We had a reclassification a few months back to go out and seek a public works director / city engineer at a significant increase in that salary. With the thinking is we would be able to save money paying that extra money because that person would have a stamp because they could build projects. Now, we've had that job description out 3 times and we haven't been able to find a qualified candidate. And what we're finding in nearby cities and with other engineering firms that they're paying $40,000 or more for a very similar position and they can't find anybody. So at the last city council meeting, there was an approval for spending up to $35,000 to hire a consulting firm to look for, a public works director / city engineer. And then we broached the topic of, well, if we went back to the original designation without the PE stamp, and we brought that position up in line with the salary being paid in weed, and we had that discussion about looking at Wairika and weed, there might be a possibility that we could bring on our public works supervisor, David Torres, who is excellent and reliable and extremely knowledgeable, and we get to promote from within. And I know he had some trepidation about moving into that role, and we've had that conversation. And if that there was an increase where we met weed in terms of our salary structure, he would take the position. And now that issue of having a year or more without a public works director is resolved. And we know this person performs. They're really, really good.
And we know him.
Yeah.
Right. Questions, councilors?
so we have, as a city council, previously approved a change of the job duties and job requirements of the public works director. I don't recall whether we did that by resolution or ordinance. My first question would be, can we take this action that's being proposed of us by simple motion tonight, or does it require a more formal process?
We passed an increase in the finance director's position with the same process last time with the motion. So I think we can do the same tonight.
All right, and the second question, I realize we have a excellent candidate who's on staff at the present time with a vacancy, with the change of wage or salary levels that we may adopt tonight, are we required to announce a job opening and open it up for resumes and all persons interested in applying for this, or are we able to do an internal promotion without going through that process?
I believe we can direct appoint. Muriel may have some input on this, but it seems like.
Well, that was what was done previously, where we did not receive any applications whatsoever. So it's been since the end of last June, I want to say, that we've had advertisements for the position as Public Works Director, as it once was, and then got changed for Public Works Director / engineer. We weren't able to get anything there. David Torres has actually filled the position since that time, and has actually taken on more as time has progressed. In my opinion, I think the process has been followed for over a year without being able to find anybody. So, I mean, opening it up for again, going out and then having David Torres have to then put in an application for the position seems to be, I can't think of the term, but it's a
Wrong.
little, exactly, redundant or perhaps moot.
I hear what you're saying. I would like to get the city attorney's opinion to make sure that what is being proposed in terms of, there's really two steps here. One step that's being proposed tonight, the only step that's being proposed tonight, is to change the salary level of the Public Works position. Fine with that, but the second part that is also in the picture, I think requires city attorney's opinion as to whether that can be done without reopening the position for
So
bid.
I can do that. What just popped into my head is down in Dunsmuir, we did direct appointment we reclassed to a Public Works Director, and we direct appointed that position with John Kenny's approval, and we appointed the Public Works Supervisor, and that was run through his office.
And I think it could very well be that is possible and legal. I want to make sure we dot our I's and cross the T's.
Can do.
That being said, I would move for approval of the salary adjustment for the Public Works Director position as proposed. Yes.
Yes, we can.
Thank you, John.
I'm not seeing any.
Speaking of crossing our T's and dotting our I's.
Yes, indeed.
If there is no public comment, then let's bring it back to council for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt salary adjustment for the Public Works Director's position as proposed by our city manager.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next agenda item was outside meetings, which Yeah, it says none, but we had the,
That's a remnant. That's a remnant that didn't get taken out.
I'm still not being able to hear you.
It's a remnant that didn't get pulled out on the final version when it was sent.
Well, we did have outside meeting. We had the League of Cities Sacramento Valley Division meeting that the city of Mount Shasta hosted here in Mount Shasta last Friday. A couple of very good presentations, one on broadband and possible funding availability, the other one being on housing issues.
These are good pitches.
I grabbed a couple of cards of the AT&T employee so that we can make further contact with her. That person also suggested that we reach out to each of the local broadband providers to see what they have, what they are planning, maybe with a non-disclosure agreement for each of them. So we can identify where the unserved and underserved households may be in Mount Shasta. I also reached out this afternoon to the Siskiyou County Office of Education because I was informed that, actually Shannon Shaw informed me that Siskiyou Office of Education is collaborating with a survey right now to identify the underserved or unserved areas, and received an email back from her this afternoon just before city council meeting started that there's basically a connection with Chico State University. And I forwarded that email both to the mayor and to the city manager.
So if I can follow up with that, it's been about 6 years. There was a 4-city approach, a study done, looking at where our deficits are in Wairika, Mount Shasta, Dunsmuir, and Weed. That hasn't changed. I think the big push here is going to be on the infrastructure bill, and right now, even though it passed almost a year, well, not quite a year ago, it's still in rulemaking, and each state is going to be then releasing that money. And there is $1 billion with the B dollars for the expansion of broadband. And so I think our best bet is to use that study and talk to the Chico Broadband Group, who I've talked to before, and see what we can do about, small cities have a harder time competing than larger cities do for this money, but I have some ins, and trying to get in the front of the line as much as possible to get some funds and, build a couple nodes out here and expand service to at least, to gig speed fiber if we can.
Todd, one of the things that was discussed was that the granularity of the data that they have down in Chico at the moment doesn't go street by street and residence by residence, and the feds are working on some database that's going to come out this fall-ish.
They're doing what's called TAZ level data using
Right.
GIS, and basically you can pinpoint as small as 10 houses in what's called a node or a TAZ, so you can pinpoint it to that level of granularity.
Well, and the point of this is the main problem it appears we have in the city are for undergrounded utility areas where cable does provide service on the street, but only on one side of it. And to do what's called the last mile, but in this case it's the last 100 feet to get it to the other side of the street. I think that would be a prime focus of what we would try and get some funds to do.
Yeah, and the thing is the 1987 FCC ruling about broadband and wireless infrastructure required wireless companies to provide seamless coverage, even in rural areas, and of course, we haven't seen that happen. And there's clearly a very, very big disparity. If you need speed fiber to your house, say you're working remotely from Google, you call up and you say you're going to be paying the $140 a month, and you're going to be adding on a business account onto it. They'll make sure there's a line from that node to your house. It's just the folks that are left behind that don't have those resources. And that's what I'm hoping that we can fill the gap on when we get this infrastructure funding coming down the
Well,
the
one
line.
of the things the AT&T, Alice, spoke to us about was that
Alice Perez.
she was coy about it, but watching the fiber, AT&T run fiber around the city, because I did, asked her, would you tell us if you're going to put up 30 to 50 foot towers with WiMAX transceivers to cover areas that we may not have coverage on, or also to provide a competitive wireless option.
Yeah.
She blushed and wouldn't, and said I'd have to sign an NDA. But that kind of told me, yeah, that's what we're going to do. I mean, it's not that I won't go through it and ask and go sign it, but it's one of those that might solve a problem for folks like Councilmember Stearns, who gets 7 megabits a second. That's a
I hope you're
download
right.
speed.
If my experience with the wireless and industry is that they drag their feet. I'm hoping that they don't, and if they don't, I'm hoping that the cost of Starlink comes down significantly as more people sign on.
Well, right. There's Starlink, and wireless in this town, especially if there's a tower and a thing on it, is, well, let's just say problematic.
Pathetic. Yes.
And so that was the meeting. It was.
Yeah, bottom line, Alice Perez from AT&T did recommend that the city meet with each of the broadband providers separately so that they can secretly tell us what their plans are without disclosing it to their competitors. And we can then try to negotiate with them to make sure that the unserved and underserved pockets of the community gets properly served.
So I don't want to beat this dead horse, but I will say that down in Dunsmuir, there were a couple, I contacted a couple wireless companies. They came down and we talked about what it would take to bring gig speed fiber to town. And they gave us a number, but they needed to know that it was, the level of scale that they needed. And so that's great, and I told them, all right, so let's start with the businesses first. We've got the Travelers Hotel, we've got some other businesses coming in. Is that enough? They all ended up back at it being with the cities to canvass their own population to determine who would actually sign on. And it just seems with the amount of money they have, they could put out a flyer. But anyway, that's
To be continued.
be continued. Yes.
Moving on to future agenda items. Anybody have anything they'd like to add on?
So I was approached by some parents to look into, let me make sure I get my words right here, feasibility study to merge all 3 Mount Shasta schools into one district, to where we come in and just ask this county to do it through a resolution and save them having to go out and get 1,000 signatures just to help them out on a study that they are looking into.
So what,
High school?
Yes, to make just Mount Shasta School District 1.
the high school district?
High school, middle school,
All
elementary?
3 of them, yeah. All 3 separate from the other cities.
So John, is that to make, is the feasibility study to see if it's
If condensing all three into one is.
one Mount Shasta Unified School District?
work or
with
not.
So that would be the elementary
And then
school,
it's through
the
the
junior
county
high,
to have the-
and the high school, but excluding, I thought it was just at the high school level, but, okay.
Apparently is all three.
All
that
three,
way, to be
okay.
the Mount Shasta school that way. Anyways, it's just simply, basically a letter of saying, just we support a study, and then the parents can go from there, depending on the results of the study.
And there'll be no cost to the
There's
city?
no cost to the city.
All right, so I'll second that idea. So it'd be an agenda item in the very near future, right?
Hopefully, yes.
Next meeting, okay. Is there someone for
For me,
staff?
yes,
Is there
yes.
someone for staff to contact to get the language?
The people who contacted me about this, I'll have them come talk to Todd, make sure that everything's taken care of properly. So, and that's all I got. So.
I don't have anything to add to the future agenda items. We did receive an email from city manager earlier today asking if we would be available for a special meeting of the city council on Tuesday, May 31st. I responded saying that I would be available
5:30 for me.
5:30.
Anytime Tuesday's fine with me.
Okay, and John Redmond,
I'm sorry, for what time?
are you available 5:30 on Tuesday, May 31st for a special meeting of the city council?
Oh, yes, that day, yes, we talked about that, yes.
Okay.
Great.
To the chair. Ad hoc committee selection for the library.
Yeah.
Well, actually, rather than make it an ad hoc committee selection, discussion and possible selection. Right? Because that could include discussion about composition.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Any others? Ladies and gentlemen, the moment has arrived. We're adjourned.
These are the messages I get.